Hello and welcome to the special transmission on the 17th extraordinary session of the foreign ministers of the Islamic cooperation countries. We know that this was an extremely important event. We've discussed this many times in the debate and throughout our transmission at PTV World today. And we will now be taking a look, of course, at what has happened in terms of any actual change for the people in Afghanistan. This has been discussed so many times previously, and we've talked about how we really need something big to come out of this special event, and whether or not that has happened is going to be under discussion at the moment. Of course, as always, we have been joined by Mr. Farrukh Pitafi and Mr. Raja Faisal, and so many of our correspondents today at PTV World were there at the heat of the moment, trying and figuring out what exactly is going on. And so we have direct reports to you as to what it is that you need to know. So in the next 2 hours, you will be getting all the information that you need to know in terms of what has happened. What is the real outcome of this OIC special session? Of course, this has been the focus of attention of the people in Pakistan and all over the world today. Before we move on to any further discussion, I'd like to take Faisal's overview, since he has been today since morning at the event and has had a very close eye as to what has been going on. Faisal, how was today for you?
It was a very busy day. Early in the morning, 7 o'clock, while I was sitting in my car, of course I was trying to heat it up because it was too cold in the morning. Suddenly, I just checked the temperature of Islamabad in the morning, and it was 7 to 8 degrees centigrades it was, but it was too cold in the morning. And at the same time, I thought of my brethren in Afghanistan and Kabul. I just checked Kabul's temperature, and it was -3. At that time, I was thinking to myself, if 8 degrees centigrades of Islamabad is getting unbearable in the morning for me, what would it be like for my brethren in Kabul, going through -3 at that time, the very time. And
Right.
I reached, obviously, Parliament. And the first thought entering in my parliament was that today I'm entering in a parliament, my country's parliament, where it is, people's will that counts there. And today, people of Pakistan's will was counting there. I saw it counting internationally as well. And today, people of Pakistan's will counted for people of Afghanistan, I must say, their brethren, because they can feel whatever is going on in Afghanistan. And then one by one, of course, when the dignitaries, when the foreign ministers, they started coming there, of course it was good to talk to them as well, whoever we had a chance to talk to. And of course, they realized as well that the situation in Afghanistan is very bad, and Muslim Ummah, they must do something about it. And the humanitarian cause for which Pakistan asked for this OIC, I think it was successful.
Okay.
Pakistan successfully, told everyone in there
Yes.
that the situations of Afghanistan, they were very bad.
Yes, Faisal. And we will be digging into the details of course, what has come out from this special session. Let me also introduce our guests who have joined us online. We've been joined by Athar Kazmi, who's a senior journalist, and we've also been joined by Mr. Adil Najm, foreign affairs expert. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us. We, of course, are talking about the OIC special session that concluded today in Pakistan. This has been a very important event for not only Pakistan but people all around the world, and especially for people in Afghanistan. We've discussed so many times as to what our expectations were with regards to this particular session. Mr. Athar, I'll start with you. In terms of the success of this event, in terms of what we expected, has it come up to that expectation?
I think the event speaks for itself, to be honest. We've seen foreign ministers, deputy foreign ministers, other dignitaries from around the world, UN present there. So I don't think there is any doubt that this event was not success. But how you measure the success, it's not that everybody was present there. How we take it forward from here, how we are going to help people of Afghanistan. So success, I would measure the success one all these things we have agreed upon, we see them in practical, we see them, people of Afghanistan getting benefit of these, whatever steps we are going to take. So that's how the world and we should measure the success.
Well, there, of course, was a very important benchmark for success of this event, which was that we are going to move forward in terms of giving humanitarian assistance to the people in Afghanistan. Dr. Adil, has that happened?
I hope it happens. I hope it happens. I think it is an important event. It's important for Pakistan diplomacy to host it. I think it is important for OIC itself to demonstrate to the world that as Muslim countries, they care about what's happening in Afghanistan. In that sense, it's a test for OIC itself. But as Athar rightly said, the real benchmark is what happens now. The real benchmark is whether the people people of Afghanistan find solace in what comes out of this. Whether that assistance materializes, but more than that, the hurdles of getting that assistance to real people in Afghanistan materializes. So in some ways, I think certainly as a conference, we can mark it as a success, but I do not think that we should think that this is done and finished. The real test will always be what will be the results of this, what will be the implementation of this, and whether that makes the life of the ordinary Afghan citizen, irrespective of anyone's diplomacy, better or not, and we all certainly hope it does.
Right, Dr. Adil Najam, first, it is great to see you in Pakistan again. Always a pleasure talking to you, sir. Let me ask you, right now we have seen that an account has been created and we were told by the Secretary General that pledges are made, but there is the issue of mechanism. So when you are thinking about it, can you think of any direct mechanism that OIC might be able to use to actually channel all the funds that they are going to collect?
Right. Thank you, Farrukh. Thank you for those kind words. And I think you're exactly right. The real challenge has been, the real challenge which brought the conference together, and the real challenge at the end of it is the same, which is the mechanism. How do you get the assistance that's been pledged by the OIC, but even by some countries before the OIC? Because in some ways what's happened is that the monetary system has broken, which means that if you're buying something from me, there's no way for me to pay back. And getting that system going is the primary task of the mechanism. I do think there are ways, and it seems we still have to see how they implement it, but it seems that the countries here have figured out at least some ways to do it. You know, one way to do it is to get direct assistance, to get wheat and corn and medicines to someone directly in physical. That is much more about humanitarian assistance. That alone won't bring back the economic, not just vitality, but a basic economic system. Right. I think the system of payments, the system of banking that you've heard being talked about all day, whether that comes together or not is the thing. And in that, I think countries that were observers in this country, in this conference, are equally important, particularly the US. Allow me to say just one thing on that. I think one of the successes and reasons for the conference was to demonstrate to the major powers that Afghanistan and the plight of Afghanistan is of interest to a large number of countries. That this is not just Afghanistan or just Pakistan saying something should be done. When they hear, 57 countries unitedly saying that something needs to be done about it, there is also pressure on the larger powers to start opening those channels that have been frozen.
Right. But Dr. Najam, with due respect, we have seen the example of G7, EU, other countries, that regardless of a channel, they have already made pledges, and they are public pledges. So here, OIC is waiting for the channels to be created to pledge?
I hope they will create some if the Islamic Development Bank, for example, can take the lead, but right now the international monetary system is such that you need the major powers on it. As you are rightly saying, the UK, for example, has already pledged even before this. But I think the benefit, the political benefit of this is that when the world sees this many countries coming together, there is greater pressure on creating some of the, it's not about unfreezing the amounts, but it's also, as you rightly pointed out, I think, It's unfreezing the mechanisms. That's the biggest test. And I hope that after this conference, it will become even more difficult for the major countries to not do something about that.
Right, and speaking about pledges, of course, this is an important discussion. Farrukh, we've had this many times before, and perhaps some sort of a clarification is required with regards to pledges, particularly the Saudi pledge.
Oh, right. Actually, there are two statements which are very interesting. One is, of course, coming from just came from the Secretary General, and it was that pledges were made. We know that it was done in the closed session, and then the Foreign Minister also actually said that there were countries which wanted to fund or provide funds, but there was no mechanism, and a few of them had problems with the idea of that money directly landing in the hands of Taliban, right?
Right.
Then, of course, a section of the media started referring to the Saudi statement, the speech that was made, and I think that it was a message that was lost in translation because earlier the statement actually said that we have so far invested or spent so much money, right? And somehow it became all of a sudden a pledge, and people started reporting. I've seen at least two notable papers reporting that way, but I think it was a mistranslation, a misunderstanding of what was said. Right now, we don't have a number figure, and from day one, we have been talking about a dollar figure regarding the expectations, at least, right? And now we don't have the other side of the picture either.
Sana, I fully agree with Farrukh on this, that of course there are no pledges at that time, but if we look at Islamic Development Bank, the chairman, he clearly said that we are going to open an account where if somebody, some of the countries, if they want to put some money in, of course they will be putting in. Plus there was something very important which he highlighted, that he highlighted that there are certain ways to invest in Afghanistan, especially on the youth, plus to ensure the food security of people of Afghanistan, like in agriculture sector. Then there are different sectors they can invest money to strengthen the institutions over there, so that the people over there, and health sector and all of the sectors.
And Faisal, that is all well and good.
Yeah.
But we are talking about a situation where half the population is displaced, vulnerable, sitting in the cold. So there has to be some direct method as well.
It still puts question marks on whether or not the special accounts is going to be used by different countries for the funds to actually be transferred to the people in Afghanistan. This is an offer that has come from the Islamic Development Bank, but does that really cater to the needs of the international community, countries who want to be able to make the pledges and give aid to Afghanistan? Is this something that they're going to go for, Mr. Athar?
The thing is that they have to come up with some sort of mechanism, but we must realize that Afghanistan, prior to Taliban takeover, they were heavily dependent on international aid. So there is already infrastructure which is on the ground, infrastructures in different cities, and there was some sort of a financial structure as well. So we need to look into that. We need to take organizations like United Nations on board, so they can play a pivotal role here. So if we take them on board, I'm sure they could come up with some sort of solution for this. And in one of the proposals from Pakistan did propose that experts from OIC and United Nations and financial institutions should work on this. So I'm sure if they think about it, if they sit on it, I'm sure they'll come up with some sort of solution. But there is already a structure there, so we must utilize that.
Yeah, but regarding that structure, I mean, I understand that all the IGOs, particularly UN bodies, have a very extensive network in Afghanistan, and they are doing their job. ICRC is also there. And then, of course, you are talking perhaps about the central bank, that is the Afghanistan Bank. So the problem with that is it is in control of the Taliban, and because Taliban are not being recognized, there is no way to transfer any kind of funds into that bank. So how do you actually, take care of that problem, Athar?
I think, the proposal from Pakistan where they say we need to set up a expert body, a group of experts from OIC, from United Nations, and from financial institutions. So if
Yeah.
they take over the bank or whatever, if they open a new bank or whatever, so if they can look after the financial side of it, and they release funds directly to Taliban when and if
Right, and
needed,
you're
and to
referring
other.
to Shah Mahmood Qureshi Saab's 6 points, which were very pithy. But again, Dr. Najam, with your permission, Sana. Dr. Najam, we were expecting that OIC at least will be giving us some kind of distribution mechanism. At this moment, it seems that this account, and of course they have gone for another structure, Thinkers Forum is going to actually help negotiate between warring factions or disagreeing factions. But at this moment, it seems that they have come up with a collecting mechanism, not distribution mechanism. So how do you actually move forward from here?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right that essentially what we have received is the input, right? We've received that some account will collect, and there is a clearer indication that countries will pledge and hopefully will put in. I hope these pledges will also become real. I do
Right.
think the pledges will become real because, if the countries were not ready to pledge and put in money, they probably wouldn't have come here. So, international negotiation, a lot of it happens before you meet. And so I think there's a readiness amongst not just Muslim countries, but a number of countries in Europe and maybe even the US to put something in there. The question that we've all grappled with, and you've mentioned, Farrukh, and Athar has mentioned, is what do you do with that money once it's there? And the immediate challenge, for example, is how do you get people to be paid for the work they are doing? How do you start paying teachers? How do you start paying health workers? And that's the mechanism. Now, I think you are right that we don't have that today. I think it is also unfair to assume that in a one-day conference we would get all the details and all the dots on the I's and the crosses on the T's. I think the political will that's been suggested today means that some mechanism they are serious about finding. For example, to answer your question, maybe a shadow bank, if you will, to the Afghan bank
Okay.
that is not controlled by the Taliban,
Right.
is controlled by some consortium of international agencies, maybe the Islamic Development Bank, that can transfer monies for some list of specific purposes. I'm not suggesting this is what they are thinking of. I'm just saying
Right.
if you were to dream up a mechanism, it could
Right.
be a shadow
But-
mechanism like
But and that is a great idea, Dr. Saab. At least I will say that if it comes from you, it is a great idea already. My concern is that if it were to happen, it would have happened already.
Yes, but I think it needed the political push. It needed the political push. I hope it will still happen. In a way, here's the thing. In a way, the hurdle to it for a number of countries, not just the US, for some others, is they don't want to be seen to be funding the Taliban government. Right? So that's the hurdle. Now what you have is, let us say, the cover, but the sense that a large number of countries, a large part of the world, is willing to find some mechanism. If they can make something, I think other countries will have a sigh of relief because no one wants a major humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan.
Right,
I
so,
honestly believe that
Sana-
because
Right,
it will
Mr.
make the West look bad.
Mr. Athar, if we talk about this mechanism and the possibility of so many different out-of-the-box mechanisms or things that need to be devised in order to take the step forward, then it means that perhaps pledges or the collection of funds is quite redundant, which then again means that the conference that is held today perhaps was unable to produce anything of some value. Is that so, or have we moved a step further? Have we? What is the progress made today?
Yeah.
Yes,
Can
Mr.
I
Adil,
jump
you
in,
can
Mr.
answer.
Adil
Yes.
Najam? I don't think the conference is redundant. I do
Okay.
think we've moved forward. I think to imagine that in a one-day conference you would actually solve all the details, the
Sure.
technical details, would be unfair.
Right.
Yeah.
But has the conversation started though on the mechanism? Is it there?
I'm quite sure it is. I think sort of, I'm quite sure it is there. I'm quite sure also it hasn't ended. I don't know what the details will be, but I think given the fact that we are where we are after all these months, the fact that we are now really thinking about a mechanism is a good thing, and that itself is a good result of the day's work.
Yeah. Athar, I had, obviously I was listening to all of the speeches as well. One of the speech which was made by Prime Minister Imran Khan, it also highlighted the facts on the ground related to, of course, we have the humanitarian crisis, number one, and number two, he highlighted that we have a security crisis as well in there, and which was, of course, related to ISIS Khorasan. He highlighted that ISIS Khorasan might prey on the people of Afghanistan because they are desperate right now. So looking at the facts, the security concerns are already there, and he, Prime Minister of Pakistan, he highlighted that if it is not controlled in Afghanistan, then of course Pakistan would be affected and the neighboring countries would be affected. Along with them, European countries will be affected as well. So could we say that in coming days we might see that these things are going to be discussed in Troika Plus, which is going to take place very soon, and we shouldn't be forgetting that this time Russia has asked for Troika Plus right after OIC. Do you think that Europe is sort of a concern as well?
I think these things are already being discussed, to be honest. Since the fall of Kabul, I think there is a concern about different, terrorist group mushrooming in Afghanistan. We had the very unfortunate experience in 90s and early 2000. So the West knows, they know the importance of having a stable government in Afghanistan. As far as the other things are concerned, like refugees and other problems, Europe is already experiencing refugee problem. They're getting thousands of refugees from Afghanistan. European governments are under pressure from their taxpayers, from their voters, from different lobbies, and as Prime Minister rightly mentioned in his speech, that right-wing parties, they are gaining votes in Europe just because of this refugee crisis. So I think there is a realization. They understand that they must tackle this. And before all this mechanism was, I'm not sure what sort of mechanism they'll come up with, but there was a mechanism before, because they knew that they had to pay certain amount of money every month to teachers, certain amount of money to hospital staff. So if they already have those figures, I don't think it would be that difficult to come up with a solution. So all they need to do is that, come up with some sort of figure that they need certain amount of money for teachers, for education, for health. So that could be a starting point. But again, as mentioned before, there could be a shadow bank which would look after the overall picture, and they only release money when and if needed.
And that is, again, a great idea. But so, Athar, I just wanted to actually update you on the status of teachers, their salaries, and hospital workers. Today, I inquired from various Afghan journalists, and they kept on saying that this staff was not being paid but 2 months before the fall of Kabul government. And after that also, for 3 months, they haven't been paid. There have been some attempts by the UN agencies to find a way to get money into their hand. But the problem is, I understand that everything cannot be done in a single day. But the people who are sitting on the streets, who might be vulnerable, who have been displaced, and who might be dying because of the cold, hunger, or because of COVID-19, what do you tell them? That they should actually wait until the entire Committee of the Nation is going to come up with some kind of mechanism to get to them?
I don't think there is much you can tell them, to be honest. If we carried on like this, the world community, if they carried on like this, there would be a disaster, and as Prime Minister said, it would be a man-made disaster. So we cannot prolong this for long. We have to come up with some sort of solution. But I think we must not be too pessimistic. Today was a big event, and I am pretty confident that in the near future we'll see some sort of progress in this regard. So let's not be too pessimistic about it.
Right, Dr. Adil, the declaration that has come out from the OIC is, of course, an important one as well. We were discussing earlier as to how a lot of times statements come out and they remain statements. With this declaration, perhaps there is much to be seen whether or not there is going to be a tangible change. And as you were saying, perhaps the conversation has already begun and there may be measures that we can see moving forward. But in terms of the value and the substance that such declarations hold, how do you place this declaration that has come out today? Does it have perhaps the value of putting the pressure that you were earlier talking about for the different members of the international community to take certain actions? If nothing else, at least does it have that much value?
I hope it does. I hope it does. I share Athir's view that, look here, first thing, if you allow me, the crisis in Afghanistan didn't start yesterday. The crisis isn't a 4-month-old crisis. There was a crisis for 20 years. For 20 years, actually not even for 20 years, but for 40 years, 20 years before that, right? Yeah. So in a way, I'm not saying that means that we can just wait for longer, but what it does mean is that you have to push the thing whatever distance you can. And today, it was pushed slightly forward. It would be wrong to assume that because a conference or a declaration came, everything will be fine. No, it won't. It would be wrong to think that we had a conference and a declaration and it means nothing, because that is wrong too. Here is what the declaration means. For Pakistan, for example, what the declaration means that we have in some ways internationalized Afghanistan again. That is a significant move. What it means is, think about this, all of us. Who was talking about Afghanistan last week? No one. How many front pages of newspapers anywhere in the world had Afghanistan written all over it? So simply the fact that the issue has been raised by Pakistan, not simply as a Pakistan issue, but to remind the world that this is a larger issue than that, and to get a chorus of 50-some countries, international agencies, putting Afghanistan back as an Afghanistan issue. And this to me is important, that today the focus of the conversation was not Taliban. The focus of the conversation was the Afghan people. Because in all of this, and I am to blame myself in my own analyses, we very often get fixated on the Taliban. What's happening with the Taliban? Can we recognize them? Can we not recognize them? Can we give money to them? Can we not give money to them? And the real victims of not just 4 months, not just 20 years, not just 40 years, is the people of Pakistan. And today, I think, was a good day because Pakistan was able to bring world attention back to the plight of the people of Pakistan.
And while listening to you, Dr. Najam, I was thinking that perhaps you mistook my question. I will never attribute something irresponsible to you. I know you never meant that the world should keep on waiting for Afghanistan to keep going through the suffering. My concern at this moment is you are absolutely right. 47 years ago, the whole crisis starts in 1974, and then it continues. And 3 months ago actually, the government also fell. But now the people who are shelterless are actually braving harshest winter, and that comes after a drought. And that means that they don't have things to eat, they don't have proper clothes, they don't have shelter, and then COVID or no COVID, they have a healthcare problem as well. So there needs to be an urgent, push for as well. So I was looking at this declaration and I found one very significant thing that stood out, and that was a compliment to Uzbekistan, which has in city of Termez created a logistic hub, and through that they perhaps are going to channel the aid on ground. Do you think that if this actually takes place and it actually pans out, is it going to be through the UN organizations? Because the point before this actually talks about all the UN bodies, and I don't think any of the OIC bodies. Dr. Najam.
if I can, before Athar comes in, I think you're right. I think one of the things that the UN will have to be central in this. The UN has to be central in this partly because no one else is willing to be central in this, right? Because that goes back to the recognizing the Taliban. So in a way, the UN has had its hand tied itself. And if the meeting today empowers the UN agencies they're already playing a role. They're already on the ground. They're already doing work. But if they can use this momentum as well as this money, for example, to give you another just idea, right? Some of the aid can come in kind, and that way you can bypass the issue of paying a government that is currently held by the Taliban. For example, issues of ration. For example, issues that you rightly point out of medicines. Right? The way UNHCR gives some of that assistance in kind rather than in money. So I think at a minimum that can enhance, some of it is already happening, but the real challenge will remain this banking question. That how do you run an economy when essentially the monetary mechanism is frozen? Not the money, but the monetary mechanism, the ways to make transactions. And that, I think, remains a challenge both for the OIC and the world. But the UN, I think, will have to play a central role.
Yeah, of course. Yes, Faisal.
Looking at the statements by United Nations, by the other countries as well, talking to British are ready to help as well, and in fact they are already sending help, and but they have the organizations who are actually working on it, like Muslim Hands and these sort of organizations. But while looking at the facts of the whole situation, of course everyone is talking about the mechanism, how to send the money in. Now when we have an office of OIC in Kabul that is willing to do better work as well, if we have United Nations already the setup you were mentioning earlier, that they have the channels to put the money through, now we have OIC putting OIC in the front, and then at the back of the channel, of course, we have United Nations and other countries as well, including America, because America is openly saying that we are ready to help for the humanitarian cause. So don't you think that it would be a good sort of scenario in which OIC takes the lead, OIC office in Kabul?
Yeah, that is the whole purpose of this session today, to be honest. OIC can play a major role being an organization of Islamic country, and they can deal with Taliban probably more effectively. But Taliban are not alien to Americans or anyone. Americans have been talking to Taliban. Taliban are in Kabul today because of Americans. Americans signed an agreement with Taliban. So all of a sudden the West is trying to portray that all these aliens have come from somewhere and they have parachuted in. No, they have been there. You've been negotiating with them. Even Americans used to pay them for safe passage in certain areas in Afghanistan. Absolutely. So Taliban are good negotiators. Americans do understand them, how they work. United Nations understand them. So I'm sure if they engage with them, because engaging with Taliban is the key here. They cannot make some sort of channel in isolation, totally cutting off Taliban, because Taliban are responsible, whether you like them or not. This is the reality. They are the government in Afghanistan at the moment. So you have to deal with them. You have to take them on board. And I'm sure if Americans and Taliban, they negotiate again, or United Nations chip in, I'm sure they could come up with some sort of mechanism. Right. So Taliban are not aliens to any of the parties.
They are not aliens. Since the question Faisal actually posed was about OIC taking the front seat, let me read the 15th point of the declaration, and that is the session requests the Islamic Development Bank to expeditiously operationalize the humanitarian trust fund by the first quarter of 2022. First quarter, sir, not now. The account doesn't start before the first quarter of 2022.
And we don't have time for that.
See, this is what I was saying, that if OIC right now in that account there is nothing and it lacks the funds, of course United Nations, it has funds, the other countries that are willing to and that are already doing, like Britain, like EU already pledged 1 billion euros. And then we have Americans, they have said it, that they are willing to help. If we have these sort of countries and that money is put in that account, the account which is made by OIC.
No, hang on. Why? When Athar is right, they can deal directly, can't they?
They can, but of course, if they don't want to deal with them in terms of money, that they don't want to give money to them, then of course.
Even this account doesn't deal with the Taliban.
And I think what's far more important is that there are numbers and pledges being made, but really help is not really being given, and it's just that and nothing more.
Or we don't know about that. It might have been actually made, but we wouldn't know about the numbers. Right?
Exactly, because
yes,
as
Mr. Adil, you wanted to add something.
Yeah.
So my sense is on Farrukh's point, I think you're right, and I think you're right on the urgency. But the first quarter of 2022 starts in 11 days. Right?
Yeah.
True.
And are we going to see some change in 11 days?
True. It starts after 11 days, but it doesn't end there.
That's very true.
Quarter is going to be a quarter, 3 months.
But to be honest, if we look at the Foreign Minister of Pakistan,
Yes,
Dr.
Mr.
Najim,
Adil.
Dr. Najim, please.
Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, so I hope that people today have gotten the same urgency that you all are highlighting and we are highlighting. I think that the political momentum of today should be understand the urgency. The question is, to me, as we have talked before, not how money gets into the fund. The question that you have highlighted, Sana has highlighted, Faisal has highlighted, is how do you get money out of that fund? How do you get that money from the fund into the hands of one people? And that, I think, is where the creativity of the world is needed. And maybe it is a shadow system. Maybe I hope they will also put pressure on especially the US, but on other Western countries to maybe give some sort of, like we have with many sanction regimes, some forms of caveats to sanction. You don't have to remove the sanctions on the Taliban, but you could, for example, I don't know if they will, you could, for example, make certain exemptions on the sanctions, certain types of activities, certain types of monies. So again, I think we should look at the political salience today as 60 or 57, 58 countries coming together and saying to the world, look here, this is not right. Have to find some way to break it. I don't know what the way will be. But the message...
Dr. Nazim, I just wanted to add in something here because I have the understanding that while, Shah Mahmood Qureshi met with the American representative, they did talk about these things, and it is understood that the Americans, they would not create hindrances in terms of sanctions if something is related to the humanitarian cause. This is what the understanding is.
Yeah,
I think they are willing
quoted
to
him also.
Yeah, I think they are willing to waive the sanctions as well for a humanitarian cause.
And that, of course,
in
would be
some
helpful if
ways,
that
again,
actually
I think
happens.
the win-win, if there is a win-win here, the US, but not just the US, the French, the Canadians, a number of the Western countries, and including many countries who were there today, do not want to be seen to be directly strengthening the Taliban government.
Very true.
Now,
Absolutely.
challenge for the Taliban is that they should also, because they will also be needed to demonstrate that humanitarian assistance is getting directly to the people it is for. And now the challenge is to find a mechanism where the money flows to those in need without having to flow through the Taliban. I think that's a doable proposition. I don't know exactly how.
Right,
But
we're
I
almost-
think that is not outside the
almost
realm
out of time, so-
what can be done and what can be done quickly.
Right, exactly. And that is, of course, the main point here, that something needs to be done urgently. My last question to you, Mr. Athar, would be with regards to the steps that you've seen so far, the direction and progress that has been made with regards to the OIC and other measures that are taken in terms of helping the people in Afghanistan. Is enough being done in terms of the urgency that is required? Can there be steps and procedures that can be fast-tracked and are not being done so? Or do you think that the pace at which things are progressing is as fast as they can go?
It's not ideal, to be honest, but steps are being taken in the right direction, because if we go back few weeks back, Pakistan was being accused of fighting the case of Taliban. All of a sudden, this has become an international issue. Pakistan is no longer seen as fighting the case of Taliban, as Prime Minister also mentioned in his speech. This is not about Taliban. We need to separate Taliban from people of Afghanistan. This is about Afghanistan. So steps are being taken. I'm quite satisfied, but obviously the task is mammoth. It's not going to be easy, and I'm sure there will be challenges on the way.
Right. So, Sana, if you allow
Yes,
me, I
Farrukh.
just wanted to actually add to something. There might be this impression that I'm contesting that this, event was not a success. I think 2 or 3 things, very strong things came out of it. Pakistan actually came out looking great. It has put all the efforts, it has been trying to lobby the entire world to help alleviate the suffering of the Afghan people. I think that is a given. Uzbekistan's name came into this, and that also is a mentionable. And then this was happening on the request of the Saudis, so that also actually qualifies. Right now, the concern at this moment is that one has to actually start working on modalities, or at
Absolutely.
least create structures for modalities. At this moment, I didn't see a structure coming out that would actually start working on modalities. Right now, we have a collective mechanism, but that money then is they are being asked, these OIC countries in this declaration are being asked to send this money or route this money or some part of it to the UN system as well.
And this, of
So
course, is
that
an important
becomes-
part, Farrukh, and we'll continue our discussion in the next hour on this. But let me thank our respected guests for joining us online, Mr. Athar Kazmi and Dr. Adil Najam, for taking out the time and giving your insights
Thank
into
you,
the
sir.
show. It has been very useful. We'll continue our discussion on what important measures have been taken today and what it means for progress in Afghanistan in the next hour. But stay tuned for the headlines for now, and we'll be right back.